On June 28, 1914, a motorcar carrying a prominent member of one of Europe's most distinguished royal families journeyed through Sarajevo. The royal visitor had arrived in Bosnia and Herzegovina on a diplomatic mission to review the imperial armed forces of his empire, an empire that had annexed the nation he was visiting just 6 years prior. However, an unusual series of events and a simple miscommunication would cause the royals' motorcade to take a wrong turn. It was a wrong turn that would reshape the course of human history. Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria was the heir apparent to the Austro-Hungarian Empire. It was widely believed that he would ascend to the throne upon the anticipated passing of his uncle, Emperor Franz Joseph I. But after his motorcade inadvertently deviated from its planned route, his life was tragically cut short by a bullet to the neck. The assassin was a Bosnian Serb named Gavrilo Princip, who sought to liberate his nation from the oppressive rule of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. In a cruel twist of fate, Archduke Franz Ferdinand died on Franz Joseph Street, a street named after the uncle he was destined to succeed. At the time, Europe was a tinderbox of tensions ready to ignite. Entangled alliances between empires, frequent ethnic conflicts, and shifting power dynamics created an atmosphere of suspicion and distrust among nations. If Europe was the tinderbox, the assassination of Franz Ferdinand was the spark that ignited the explosion. On July 28, exactly 1 month after the Archduke's death, Austria declared war on Serbia and began its bombardment of Belgrade. This marked the beginning of World War I, the most devastating conflict humanity had ever witnessed. During the war, nations grew increasingly wary of foreign powers and spies infiltrating their ranks to spread dissent or gather intelligence that could aid their enemies. To safeguard themselves, many countries enacted new laws aimed at enhancing public safety or facilitating the capture and imprisonment of those who posed a threat to the nation. In the United Kingdom, for instance, whistling was prohibited on the grounds that it could be mistaken for an air raid siren and cause unnecessary panic. In Samoa, racial segregation and censorship were enforced after New Zealand seized control of the islands early in the war. And in the United States, the Espionage Act of 1917 was passed, granting the government broad powers to arrest and detain anyone suspected of assisting their enemies. Today, World War I has faded into the annals of history. However, some of the oppressive laws created during that turbulent era persist. Julian Assange, an Australian citizen and the founder of WikiLeaks, is currently languishing in Belmarsh Prison in England. Assange is facing espionage charges in the United States, charges that could result in a sentence of up to 175 years. Many argue, myself included, that Assange is guilty of nothing more than exposing war crimes committed by the US military in Iraq. These war crimes, including the murder of innocent civilians, were sometimes captured on video by the very soldiers perpetrating the atrocities. What is less known is that Assange is being charged under the Espionage Act of 1917, the same set of laws created by the US during the chaotic peak of World War I. Laws born in a time of war, laws that no longer reflect the world we live in, but laws that endure nonetheless. As you may be aware, a war is currently raging in Ukraine. A little over a week ago, after months of posturing and claims of harmless military exercises, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of its peaceful neighbor. There are many possible explanations for Russia's motives: a desire for greater global influence, the acquisition of valuable territory, or a nostalgic yearning to revive the glory of the Soviet Union. Whatever the reason, I won't delve into that here. There are other sources far better equipped to uncover Putin's true motivations. Instead, I want to discuss the narratives surrounding this war and how they might be used to create laws or impose restrictions that could curtail our financial freedoms. One of the major talking points about the invasion of Ukraine has been the severe economic sanctions imposed on Russia. For those unfamiliar, sanctions are economic penalties intended to hinder Russia's ability to trade freely, with the goal of stemming the flow of foreign money into the country. Less money in Russia's economy means fewer resources to fund its war in Ukraine. In most cases, sanctions are little more than symbolic gestures of disapproval. But in the case of Russia, the sanctions have been swift, comprehensive, and impactful. For instance, The Kremlin's diplomats have been expelled from numerous Western nations, and banks have been disconnected from the SWIFT payment system. European airspace and ports are closed to Russian carriers and ships, and major companies like Airbnb have ceased operations in Russia altogether. In a bold move to target Putin's inner circle, countries like Norway, Italy, France, and Germany have begun seizing the assets of Russian oligarchs, including the confiscation of Dilbar, the world's largest yacht. Despite all these sanctions, the war in Ukraine rages on. Consequently, there's been growing discussion about additional measures to restrict the flow of money into Russia. Inevitably, this conversation has turned to Bitcoin. CNN and the New York Times have published articles describing how wealthy Russians could theoretically use cryptocurrency to circumvent financial sanctions. CNN even went so far as to portray Bitcoin as the primary tool for achieving this. Financial sanctions are easier than ever for Russians to evade. Thank Bitcoin, CNN declared. CNN's statement exudes confidence, but it's far from the truth. Just before Russia's invasion, daily crypto trading activity by Russians amounted to over $70 million, as reported by Bloomberg. On March 3rd, just days after sanctions were imposed, this activity had plummeted by more than half to only $34.1 million per day. While many news outlets are pushing the narrative that Bitcoin will enable Russia to easily evade sanctions, the real-world data tells a very different story. In short, the sanctions are effective. The numbers don't lie. But many media outlets are ignoring these facts, because to them, the facts are irrelevant. What matters is the narrative. Today, a nation's true power lies in its economic strength, and part of that strength comes from people trading in that nation's currency, whether it be euros, dollars, yen, or otherwise. While crypto empowers individuals by giving them more control over their money and how they use it, it also reduces the amount of real money within a nation's centrally controlled financial system. Less money in a nation's ecosystem translates to less financial power for that nation and its government. This is the primary reason many governments have been so quick to condemn the use of decentralized money, and why many in the legacy media, the mouthpieces of government, are also fond of promoting anti-crypto rhetoric. In the context of the war in Ukraine, it's simply not accurate to claim that Bitcoin allows Russians to easily evade sanctions. The dramatic decrease in crypto usage in Russia over the past week clearly demonstrates this. But that won't stop those in power and their media allies from using the war as a pretext to impose restrictions or enact new laws that could lead to stricter regulation of cryptocurrency for all of us. In other words, never let a good crisis go to waste. If new laws limiting crypto's use are implemented due to the war in Ukraine, don't assume they'll disappear when the war ends. History provides ample evidence that this is often not the case. My goal isn't to persuade you to invest some of your savings in crypto or other decentralized financial services. However, if you do choose to do so, I believe you'll likely be doing yourself a favor. Instead, my aim is to shed light on the kinds of narratives that are regularly employed to shape our world and our money. Of course, the greatest tragedy unfolding in Ukraine is the senseless loss of life on all sides and the millions of people whose lives have been uprooted or forced to flee their homes. But it's important to remember that such a tragedy can also be exploited by those in power to consolidate their control. In a sense, it's a form of war profiteering. The difference is that the spoils of war aren't monetary, they're the manipulation of our thoughts and beliefs. Just keep in mind, there's a motive behind every story. Thank you for watching. Support this project by subscribing, sharing, and giving it a thumbs up.